There's two people join us. That's good. Okay, so I think that's we gave enough time. Maybe people will join us later. So thank you everyone for coming to join our session today. So on behalf of the Center for Chinese Studies at University of Hawaii, I would like to welcome everyone to our Fall 2024 CCS webinar series. And today's session features a cross-cultural transnational book talk and discussions on topic education for social justice, the meaning of justice and current research in China. My name is Ni Zhang. I'm currently serving as the CCS Associate Director. During today's session, our CCF staff, Academic Support Specialist Adriana Choi, will monitor the chat room and assist with any logistic queries you may have. Please note that we are recording today's session so it can be uploaded to our YouTube channel. You will find links for our YouTube channel website in the chat room. So today's session is also co-sponsored by College of Education, Department of Educational Foundations at UH Manoa. We would like to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsor for their kind support. Before the session starts, I'll quickly go over some procedural reminders. Just feel free to use the chat room for posting any technical or other queries, but please use the Q&A tool for submitting your comments and questions to speakers, which will be answered during the Q&A portion of our session. So we kindly ask that you don't wait until last minute to post your comments. So ask no more than 2 questions and keep them concise. Questions will be answered in the order they have submitted, but we might also group them together in order to make the best use of our time. We further reserve the right to dismiss comments and questions that are not relevant or civil in tone. After today's session, you will receive a brief survey and would greatly appreciate your constructive feedback. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Mr. Jose Barzola. Jose is currently the Conflict and Peace Specialist at the CARES program. CARES stands for Campus Awareness Response Education Solutions at University of Hawaii. So where he provides conflict service and programming to all students and employees to cultivate a culture of healthy, positive relationships. So now let me turn over to Jose Barzola. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for guiding us today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us as well for a special conversation today. It's an honor to be here with you all today, having a wonderful conversation about education for social justice, the meaning of justice, and current research in China. We have quite a wonderful group of guests with us today. I just want to share our main speakers today is Professor Nicholas Michelli and Professor Tina Jacobowitz. So Professor Michelli is a specialist in education for democracy, social justice, and has written extensively on the subject. He is a professor of education at Johns Hopkins University, working with doctoral students. He holds a BA degree from Montclair State University, an MA in New York University in politics and Asian African studies, and an EDD from Columbia University, with a focus on organizational change. He is presidential professor emeritus at SUNY, and he's the lead author of this publication that we'll be going deep into today. Professor Jacobowitz is a specialist in literacy education, critical thinking, education for democracy, and education for social justice. Her BA is from Brooklyn College, her MA is from University of Wisconsin, and her PhD is from New York University. And she's also a lead author for today's publication. I will be introducing the panelists later on when we get to the Q&A, and then our other wonderful guest speakers as we get to their portion of today's sessions. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to our Professor Michelli and Professor Jacobowitz.
Thank you so much. As I said in this thing, it's really wonderful that we have an opportunity to interact with you folks and get your ideas about what's going on in our society and, in fact, in the world. You know, social justice is a big issue, and many places are struggling with what exactly it means. And I've invited several people, as you know, Nee, Kanita Williams, Stacy Campbell, Diane D. Johansson, who have been my students at Johns Hopkins and elsewhere, to join us so that they can answer some of the questions that are coming up. And we hope that some of you have been able to read some of the book. We had it available, as you know, to share. And then I just wanted to mention that Tina, in addition to being my colleague in this work, also happens to be my wife. I don't know if I should say that, but she is. And she's very, very talented artist. In fact, this is, oops, how come my screen's not moving? There. She did the cover for the book, but that's not her best art. She does wonderful art. And this is, as you can see, a book about education for social justice, the meaning of justice and current research. Tina and I, Stacy Campbell and Dee Johansen, wrote the chapters, and the folks at the bottom of the title wrote a section on current research on the issue. For each of them, their dissertation was related to what they wrote about. So we have that opportunity. And my travels. Well, I was invited by the University of Shanghai to publish one of my books, which is called Teacher Education for Democracy and Social Justice. And this is their publication, which came out 10 years ago. And, you know, I first said to the person who offered to publish it, I said, "You're going to go to jail? Democracy and social justice?" You know, my terrible thought. But so I said to him, he said, "Oh, no, we do this all the time." And of course, it sold better in China than it did in the United States, which we thought was interesting. And it's still out there, it's still available. And I've been working in lots of different places. I did work in Qatar, I did work in the United Arab Emirates, in Oman, in Slovakia, in France, in the Czech Republic, all on social justice. So that's what I've been doing. So, Tina, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, we would like to start by asking you to just write down your current definition of social justice and the idea of democracy. Just if you could just jot down your thoughts about those two concepts, social justice and democracy.
And hopefully you'll share with us where you are and if you made any changes in your definitions. That's the idea. So the key idea here is what we call an essentially contested concept. There's a British philosopher named Galli, and he is the one who started with this idea. And an essentially contested concept is an important idea which has different meaning within a given group. So, for example, if we had 5 people and asked them to define social justice, we'd have more than one definition, for sure, because these are essentially contested. They mean different things to different people. Same thing is true with democracy, you know, as to what that means. And the issue is that if you're going to work with contested concepts like social justice, you can't just let people go in without an effort to try to agree on a shared vision. What does it mean? Doesn't mean they have to absolutely agree on the meaning on everything, but you need a shared vision if you're going to be productive in moving forward. So one of the things that we've learned how to do is to take the time to develop a shared vision of what we think are these contested concepts. If you don't have enough agreement, then you're going to have a problem. Even though my wife told me not to say this, I have to. When I was working at City University of New York for the chancellor, he asked me to speak to the board of trustees about my work. So I went in and I talked about what I talk about, democracy and social justice. A day later, three of the board's representatives met with me and said, "We don't want to use the word social justice. We don't want you to use it." I said, "Can I talk about opportunity? Can I talk about non-discrimination?" "Yes." "So why can't I say social justice?" They say, "Because that means you want to take our money and give it to someone else." So that was their limited definition of social justice. And for that reason, they didn't want me to use it. Of course, I didn't listen to them. But nevertheless, you run into that sort of thing all the time. So here are some contested concepts that we've talked about and dealt with. And we have chapters in this book about all of them. What is freedom? What is social justice? What about knowledge and the role of schools and parents? Critical thinking. What do we mean by education? And what about citizenship? So let's spend a little time with them just to get a sense of it. What is democracy? Is it a system of government? Is it personal interaction on members of society? Is it about civics? Is it about participation in the governmental process? Is it about how we treat others, about respect, civil and nonviolent behavior? Is it all these things? Many people just pick out one item and say, democracy is about voting. Well, we think a democracy also extends to these other things. And if you don't have a democracy with civility and nonviolent behavior, and we know that that's been a problem in the United States, then you have less than democracy. So that's what we think about democracy. Freedom. Does it mean personal freedom? Is it unlimited? You know, our Supreme Court said you cannot shout fire in a crowded theater if there is none. That's not a freedom. That's not free speech. You can't do that because that will cause people to panic and run and hurt themselves. So what are the limits of freedom and who decides it? And we know that in the United States, in the Declaration of Independence, it says all men are created equal. They didn't mean women and didn't even mean all men. They meant men who had property. That was the original definition. So there's that limit about equality. Does it extend to speech, to the press, and to religion? Well, I think most of us would say yes, but there are places that want to limit it, and there are limits to speech, of course, and limits to the press, and it's an ongoing problem in the United States. Then we have social justice, and I started with that. Is it about distributing wealth? Is it about equity between the rich and the poor? Is it about the majority and the minority? And where do issues of discrimination and repression come in? And are there other ways to conceive of it? Now, one example of discrimination and expression in this society is the Chinese Immigration Exclusion Act, which some of you may know actually goes all the way back to 1882. And it wasn't until the 1940s that it was eliminated. Why did they want an Immigration Exclusion Act? Well, they were worried about immigrants coming in and taking jobs. That's what we hear now. It's the same issue. You come in, take now, and Tina just wrote an editorial, a letter to the editor. You want to say a word about that?
Yes, I wrote a letter about people being concerned that immigrants are taking jobs away from Americans. They're causing violence in different communities. And it's all not true. It's just not true. And that they don't pay taxes. That's another thing people say. We found this out when we were knocking on doors to get people to vote. And so I wrote a letter to the editor about this. And I showed that immigrants pay a lot of taxes. They pay billions in taxes, but they can't get Social Security because they don't have Social Security numbers. And in communities where there are a lot of immigrants, crime is less than in communities that don't have a lot of immigrants. And there are facts that support this.
And it is the case that here, where we are, which is the East End of Long Island, we depend on immigrants. There are farmers here, and most of the farming is done by immigrants. So we have this sort of problem. I just want to make it clear. We had the Chinese Exclusion Act, which went away. But discrimination is not limited to Asians, as you well know. For example, my family was Italian. Southern Europeans were discriminated against terribly, whether they were Italians or Spaniards or whatever. It was really an ongoing serious problem. And of course, the discrimination against Jews is really ongoing. In fact, Tina's family came here and they couldn't get into the United States. And most of them were sent to Australia, and they're still in Australia. Isn't that right, Tina?
Yes.
Her parents got here, but their brothers and sisters are in Australia. In fact, her mother did not see her sisters, right? Many of them. So that sort of thing is, just want to make it clear that immigration discrimination is an ongoing problem. And how do you have social justice if you don't have fairness in that respect? What about knowledge? What do we mean by now? Who's responsible for it? Is it equally distributed? And what constitutes knowledge? Who creates knowledge? Teachers? Everyone? Knowledge is obviously very important. And so we have to study it as a contested concept. In some people's minds, it's the result of experimentation. What comes out of science is knowledge. I'm reading a book by Jacob Bronowski called The Ascent of Man, which is the history of the Evolution of Science. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book about how knowledge came to evolve in our societies. So that's another contested concept. So is critical thinking. And Tina and I have done a lot of work in critical thinking, and we have definitions of it. We're happy to share them with you. And we think it's very important in a democracy. We think it's important in personal life and political decision making, and perhaps both. And it is being able to take an important issue, identify the criteria that you're using to make a judgment, and follow through on that. So the other thing to know is that having good judgment doesn't guarantee a good outcome. And people get surprised when they hear us say that, but it's not a guarantee. Then what about education? We don't think you can define education unless some of these other questions have been answered. What do we mean by knowledge? What do we mean by social justice, by democracy? We have to answer all of them. And then finally, citizenship. Legal status or more? Is it behavior? Are people who are citizens expected to behave in the same way as others? And is any civilly committed individual a citizen? And we know, of course, citizenship, among other things, gets tied to voting. And at the beginning, it was only men who had money and property who voted. It's a long time before women could vote. And of course, it wasn't until much later, after slavery was ended, that blacks had the right to vote, and others who were naturalized citizens. So it's a complicated, complex, essentially contested concept. Now, you know what we've said in the book about what the elements of social justice are. It's true in the United States, it's true in China, it's true all over the world. What are some of the elements? Well, these are some of the things. Civic education. The schools prepare students to be active participants and members of the society. Do they learn about it in schools? Most of our states don't require civic education. So how do you learn how to be a participant? It's not automatic. It's got to be learned. What about discrimination and repression? And this is something I hope Kanita can talk to a little bit later too. Slavery, segregation, racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. You know, this society, if you follow this election, you hear so much talk about limiting immigration. And, you know, I don't know if you heard about this, but our debate among the two vice president candidates, one of them said that Haitian immigrants are eating the pets of other people. Well, it's not true. But the point is we have a lot of discrimination, a lot of repression. So we got to think about how that happens. And if you're going to say you're a democracy, you have to face it and deal with it. And then what about college going factors in economic success? What does it take to go to college, assuming that that's a goal? What is the effect of race and other factors like wealth? You know, in our society, students leave colleges with huge loans that they have to pay off. And efforts to solve that have not been successful, although they're trying. What about responsive teaching? This is important. Do you want to say something about this?
No, go ahead. You keep.
That responsive teaching involves taking into account the culture and the background of the student. How do we know who they are, and how do we respond to what their background is and what their knowledge is? Then we have this idea of community schools, which Dee Hansen can talk to a little bit later. She's a psychologist in the Surrey schools in northwestern part of the United States. And you know, we have a big election coming up.
Canada.
Canada, sorry. It's above the northwestern part. We have a big election coming up. And I said there a couple of weeks ago, there's one candidate who, if he gets elected president again, we may want to move to Canada. And she said, you're welcome. So we may move, but who knows? It's a tough time for us, I'll tell you that. So these are what's in the chapters that are in the book. And I'm so interested to hear how they apply to other countries. When I was in China, as I said, I spent a lot of time both in Hong Kong and in Shanghai. And I spoke at both the universities in both places. And I had wonderful interactions. And I had very smart students who said, so in the United States, democracy means that if you're rich, you get what you want. If you're not rich, you don't. And, you know, he was pretty close to right. And it's just an interesting issue for what it means.
Well, there's a
So-
lot of a mix-up between democracy and capitalism. People don't always know the difference.
So this is a complicated area. They are essentially contested concepts. And I think I don't want to go on beyond that, except to say, we love your questions. We love to hear what's going on. And these are our emails. If anybody has any questions later and want to write to us, we'd love to hear from you. So back to you, Jose, or who's talking now? Nee, is it you?
Thank you so much for just giving us basically some cliff notes as to this wonderful production of this book that you've kind of put together. And there's just such a wide range of topics to cover, and I know today's session will not take a deep dive into everything there, but it was it's a lot of areas to ponder, most definitely. So thank you so much for guiding us along. I know we have some time still, so I just wanted to ask some follow-up questions to some of the topics that you did bring up. So you talked about discrimination a bit. So how does that fit in society that claims to be, democratic and promotes social justice? Such as, how can the treatment of the immigrants, including the Chinese Exclusion Act, exist in such a society?
Well, it's because there are people who feel that immigrants take their jobs. That's the issue. And they're afraid that too many immigrants are going to cause problems. And we know that's been going on here, especially now. And I think that President Biden and Vice President Harris have tried to deal with it, but it's amazing, especially the Chinese Exclusion Act. That's the first time in this society that we ever excluded an entire group of people by act. And it hasn't happened since, except not by name. It just happens by practice and by policy. So I think it is antithetical to being a democracy if you have that kind of discrimination and that kind of exclusion.
We usually say that we don't have a democracy here. We have an emerging democracy, hopefully. But the way things are going right now, if you've been following it, I mean, you're in one of the states, you know what's going on. We're very worried about becoming an autocracy.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that concern. I know, especially with us being in the realm of education, we are so well in the know of how, I think a lot of what's resulted over time is because, the content of education across our nation and how different sectors of our government have different um, strategies for what it is that we intake and what we teach our future generations. I wonder if you just have any guidance from your wisdom and your knowledge base as to like, is it something that the content of education should be set up by the government as a whole, like from DC onward, or right now we have it on a state basis.
State basis, that's right. Yeah. I don't think it's ever going to change, and I think that it's going to be on a state basis. In fact, you know that in the Constitution, in Article 10 of our Constitution, it says that anything that is not reserved to the federal government goes to the states. And unless they pass an amendment about education, the federal government cannot rule with respect to education. In fact, it is a state power that goes on. And I wonder, someone who's looked at this, Kanita, do you want to say anything about this? Are you there?
Tomorrow, there will be lots of sun.
Kanita,
In particular
yes,
about
thank you.
About discrimination and racism, which you wrote about.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nick, for asking. I would just echo a lot of what you're saying. I mean, at the core, it does not fit in democracy. But what I would say and challenge us to do is to think more broadly about how and why it doesn't fit. I think oftentimes when we think about discrimination and racism, we think about interpersonal racism. We think about the the attitudes, the beliefs, the actions that we have toward individuals. And that actually, it's a problem, but it's not our biggest problem. The biggest problem is the systemic and institutional racism. It is how we categorically and systemically advantage some while keeping others situated further from opportunity. And what we need to realize is that we don't necessarily need bad actors for policies and practices to be discriminatory or racist. And I think I would challenge us to be more thoughtful about that.
Yeah. Your organization works on that, does it not, Kanita? What's it called?
It does. The Southern Education Foundation. Our role, we were actually created in the wake of the Civil War to create a system of public education for the newly emancipated population. So now for over 150 years, a century and a half, we've been in this space of access and opportunity for traditionally underserved communities. And that has expanded, of course, because our definition of underserved communities has expanded, unfortunately. And the thought is that we are working so that we have true social justice. And that is essentially when, students get what they need when they need it to be propelled to the opportunity-rich lives that they deserve. And race is no longer a reliable predictor of student success. And so we are very much in this space of race and race equity and social justice, and unapologetic about the fact that we actually need to center discrimination, race, and racism in these discussions, or else we're never going to actually solve them.
Yeah, it really is a problem. And by the way, Kanita has written about critical race theory, for example, which is a big issue, which is, people are saying you shouldn't have that in schools. You shouldn't be teaching about critical race theory. So maybe later on, somebody wants to ask her about that.
Yeah,
and I'll that later.
Yeah, and I'll say that no school K-12 is teaching critical race theory. That would be the short answer.
That's right. Yeah, I know.
Right.
That's what's been said.
Of course, we know that schools are not teaching critical race theory directly at elementary level or even possibly high school level. It's usually on the graduate level that people discuss it. But, when the states are in control of education, we're in a lot of trouble. The book banning that's going on in Florida and now other states. I mean, we can't go back. We can't go back to state control over civil rights and education and all of these things that are so important to a democracy.
Yeah, I've done a lot of reading in the last couple of years about the evolution of the end of slavery and Lincoln's role and what was going on then. And Lincoln and many others thought that when blacks were freed as slaves, they should be sent overseas. They shouldn't be kept in this country. And major newspapers say, including the Los Angeles Times, for example, said that'd be a good idea because they're never going to fit in. And they were going to send them to Western Africa. And they in fact, the Congress actually allocated money for that. And for a while, Lincoln thought that that he would, in fact, unmute my microphone. Okay, no, I can't do that because that's later. Whoops. Anyway, I just lost my whatever I had. So anyway, it's a big problem. I'm sorry, I lost my PowerPoint here somehow.
You don't need it.
I don't need it. I don't. You're right. I don't need it.
No, and thank you so much though for bringing to the forefront and how important it is to be having these conversations. And Kanita, for folks in the audience, Kanita Williams serves as the Chief Operating Officer at the Southern Education Foundation. And thank you for the good work you're doing. And it's collective. I think one of the things that I always try to get across to folks, it's not as though it's just a few people doing the work. We need a collaborative. We need to empower folks to get involved in the process. I mean, that's really the whole democracy process and getting out there and voting and creating change. And yeah, I mean, nothing's going to change unless we actively engage in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we should certainly try to be models if we believe that this is important in the world. It's important that we go after it and we do it openly and directly. And Kanita just been wonderful in this. In fact, when she was at Johns Hopkins, I had the pleasure of nominating her for the major award that they give each year to students. Thank you. I did, and she got the award. Okay. It's telling me to unmute myself, but if I do that, it'll be a problem. Okay, next.
Yes. Well, as far as I know we talked a little bit about well, you kind of took a brief knowledge of community schools and how are they, so I'm wondering what are community schools and how are they different from other schools and how they come to be. I know one of our panelists today specifically, and maybe you want to speak about it, or I know Stacy Campos joining us also, who's worked within community schools since 2003 in the New York area. So I'll leave it open to see who wants to jump in on that question.
D should address
Dee, do you
that.
want to talk about it?
Is she
Hi,
there?
everyone. Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Hi, everybody from beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Yes, unfortunately, Stacy is in the path of a really
Oh my-
bad tornado in Florida and was unable to join us.
Oh my
We're all
goodness.
hoping
Thank
that she's
you.
going to be okay.
Oh,
And again, I think she's just with her family right now. But I can absolutely address just a little bit about what community schools are. Of course, looking at it through a Canadian lens versus an American one. We do community schools a little bit differently here. We don't have schools that are specifically entitled like as community schools, but we have what we call community schools partnerships. And so the goal really of community schools partnerships is really to support and build a school as a community hub. And I think that's very similar to the work that's done in the States. Stacy does oversee community schools there. So people that are, again, interested in kind of building a community school or running a community school, it's run very similarly. It's just a little bit of a different logistics when we look at it from a Canadian lens versus an American lens. But really the idea is the same, which is basically making sure that the school is viewed as this community hub. It is something that is connected to the community. It is the center. It brings all of the actors that are important within a school, and of course, students being at the center, but we have families, we have educators, we have administrators, we have community leaders and community support workers also that are part of that community hub. And that is where really when you think about it through like a social justice lens, what we want to take a look at is all of those really important contextual factors that are really important in building success in our students. So when we take a look at that, we're looking beyond, like, for example, we talk a little bit about mental health, of course, and all of us post-COVID really struggled, especially with our children and adolescents populations in terms of their mental health and how to support them. And the real important part there was we really know that it goes beyond the scope of a school, but school is so important. And it's such a critical piece of a child and an adolescent life that we want to kind of leverage that to make it where we are really supporting them even beyond the scope of typically what we would do in a school, right? And then what that means is that you are enlisting community supports, but you are also making sure that you are looking at those contextual factors, those social determinants that Kenita talked about and kind of highlighted is so important. You know, looking at those structural gaps that we have that really work against social justice goals. So what we want to do is make sure that we are really including all of those really important, like, you know, access to services, working conditions, you know, what our families and our communities need in order to kind of build success. So it is really kind of changing the framework a little bit, and community schools really works at looking at what we call kind of building communities of care. So you're looking at a lot of interagency collaboration, a lot of cross-community collaboration, and really keeping in mind that culturally sustainable and responsive practice that's really important. So you are looking at, you know, for example, here in British Columbia, just as an example, you know, bringing in our Indigenous elders and our Indigenous community, again, which has typically really been struggling. And we have, of course, you know, significantly lower graduation rates for our Indigenous population. Well, we need to make sure that we are including our Indigenous community and our elders and their ways of knowing and understanding that we know is going to build success for all of those students, right? And not only those students, but I think it enriches the community as a whole. So I think really what we focus on within the community schools framework is really making sure we are building in those good factors. And as Nick mentioned, having those constant conversations and questions where you are reviewing and thinking, because things are changing and it's a complex issue. So you are wanting to have those conversations and check-ins frequently so that that because that ongoing kind of collaborative relationship, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of introspection. So it's really those opportunities, or building in those opportunities to have those connections with many different communities in order to kind of build success in our kids.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. It really is a struggle in New York, by the way, because many community schools originally thought they wouldn't have to follow the rules of testing and meet the tests that the state sets. And of course, that's clear. They do have to meet them. And New York, by the way, is the most segregated state in the nation. There are more schools with more than 50% African American or non-white students than any other school, any other state. So it became an issue as to whether these community schools were going to, in fact, allow less standards. And of course, that was never the intent. But the state stepped in and tried to push it a bit. So it's an interesting issue because the state doesn't want to give up any power, and the thought of a community school makes them think they might have to do that. They don't.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for folks, Diana Jansen, thank you so much for your insights. She's a school psychologist with a background in special education who's been working at the Surrey School District in British Columbia, Canada for over 20 years. I just love the picture you painted of, what community schools are doing. It reminds me a little bit of like Montessori education. But I think that's part of why we have these conversations, to learn beyond our borders, learn beyond our initial perspective of what we've been doing, and hopefully we can work to do better for our overall communities as a whole, our world community as a whole. I do want to we did get a question from the audience. Initially, I just wanted to share. Wondering if could elaborate a little further on the earlier point of American democracy being confused with capitalism. I think this is a question for you, Nick.
Democracy competing with capitalism, is that what you said?
Yeah, someone talked about if you could elaborate on your point of American democracy being confused with capitalism.
Yep. That's a good point. It is. You're right. And of course, there's a struggle as to what exactly that means. Is capitalism absolutely unchallengeable? Bernie Sanders, who is one of our politicians, published this book recently, which says it's okay to be angry about capitalism. And it is a really good book. And he talks about what the problems with capitalism are. And we are, in fact, we are a capitalist society. That's true, whatever that means. But it sometimes means that rich people do better. And both of the one of the candidates running for president promises that rich people are going to pay their fair share of taxes, which would take away some of the issues of capitalism that those people who are rich think is important, that they shouldn't have to pay those high taxes. And billionaires pay very little taxes, including one of the billionaires who's running for president. But he's not really a billionaire. Don't tell anybody. So anyway, it's an interesting question that the conflict between democracy and capitalism, and democracy is, I think, what we have to worry about. Capitalism sort of takes care of itself, except where it interferes with democracy by allowing people with wealth to have special conditions.
Privileges.
Yeah. I think that's about what I would say.
One might ask, can you have a capitalist society and democracy together? And the way it is now, I don't think you can, because not everybody has access to the wealth that exists in the hands of the few. And once that happens, there's no more democracy. So I don't think
Yeah.
that
a
they can
problem.
coexist.
Like
peacefully.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that, one of the candidates, Kamala Harris, is arguing for reducing the cost of drugs. And she's done that already. The current president has done that. And people say, how are you going to pay for that? She said, we're going to tax billionaires. They're not paying their taxes adequately. And that's how we're going to do it. And of course, that creates angry among some very wealthy and very powerful people. So if we say to them, we want you to step in for the help of social justice, they think, like the people at CUNY did, that it means we want to take their money and give it to somebody else. That doesn't have to be the case to have democracy or social justice either. So it's a problem. I don't know how it's going to resolve itself. We have an election very soon. Make sure you vote. Oh, sorry.
Well, the Hawaiians can vote.
I know.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the insights into the wonderful work that you're doing, and giving a plug for Bernie's book. I bet he'll appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I got 2 of them in the mail. I don't know.
he must really
They
like
came
you.
to us out of nowhere. We never ordered them or bought them. They just appeared.
And it's really good, by the way. Really good. So,
Any tips for like how to engage in social justice conversations in the classrooms?
I think it's important to sit down and try to reach a shared vision of what we're talking about. Because I guarantee you there would be big differences to what it means. And you have to say, well, for the sake of our conversation, let's agree as to what we mean by social justice. And maybe after we talk, it'll change. But we have to start with some agreement. So there has to be a shared vision. I think that's the most important thing. Because of all the contested concepts, social justice may be the one that raises the most conflict. So that's my thought. You have to that shared vision is very important. We've written about it, and others have too.
No,
Doesn't
thank
mean
you.
you have an absolute definition, but you agree as to what the key elements are for the sake of a conversation.
And I think part of it is providing space to have that conversation
Oh,
is what
course,
you're getting
yeah.
at. Because I know most classroom settings are sometimes not like that. It's more of a, here's the syllabus, here's the content that I need to get through because of standards or whatever it may be,
Absolutely.
and that's it. And so it's so yeah, providing the space for that curiosity and creating that brave space, as we say, for folks to feel comfortable enough to speak up
Well,
and collaborate on a shared vision together.
that's where civic education comes in. That's why it should be a part of every school. Civic education would include a shared vision of social justice.
Yeah. We have another question that's come through. Just wondering, here in the US, if social justice is possible with such heavy military presence locally and globally.
Military presence? I don't know. I never thought of it that way. I don't feel the military very present around me. The military is reasonably powerful, but it's not that active in its in an effort to interfere with the way people live in this country. I mean, they have a role that's pretty clear, and it's not something that I saw as a problem. I mean, there are problems, but it's not the problem that has to do with dealing with social justice. What do you think?
I'm not sure what you're asking us. Can democracy exist with a military presence? Is that the question?
Well, they're asking, as an American, wondering if social justice is possible with such a heavy military presence locally and globally. And I think, especially being here in Hawaii, we do have a large military presence here. And then I think they might be alluding to also what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah. We'll have to think about it. I mean, I think that's something to consider and worry about. But I haven't seen the military presence as an issue to minimize social justice. So I don't know what more to say about it. That's interesting question.
No, thank you. Thank you. So from what I'm hearing is that social justice is still definitely possible, even with military presence. If anything, I think in just from my own experience, I think we see it more clearly sometimes because when there is military presence, because that's when sometimes you see the activism that comes along with social justice.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's true.
I mean, you have to think about what the military presence is. Is it there to protect people when they're peacefully protesting? Or is it there to arrest them when they're peacefully protesting? So it's a military presence could mean many different things. It's not necessarily something bad. I mean, we call in the National Guard when we have emergencies here. And that's a positive thing. But if the military presence is used to suppress protests or different points of views, then it is a problem. And it shouldn't happen in a democratic society, but it does.
Yeah, I mean, there were people who thought the military should be called in when Trump did his thing in that, what was it, January
January 6th.
6th, trying to control the vote to change the outcome of the election. And nobody would do it. Nobody was willing to put the military in. And of course, they might have helped because people died in the Capitol building as a part of that event. So that would have been perhaps a use, but it didn't happen. Nobody was willing to do it.
Well, Trump wasn't willing to do it. That's why it didn't happen.
well, thank you. I think you bring up a really good point as far as like, and I think part of it's also, you bring up the spot once more, shifting our perspective about what good the military is available, but many times, unfortunately, the news sometimes doesn't cover that. So I think that's where part of the challenges arise, where if we just go based on like what we intake from news stations or whatever, many times it's the negative. You don't hear those heartwarming stories, or you don't hear those stories of support or the community coming together, building community, unfortunately. So, yeah.
And of course, in the case that we're in now in Florida, the military is doing a great deal in the hurricanes. They've called out the National Guard to help and protect people. So there are times when it's obviously something we should do and it doesn't interfere with democracy or social justice. It helps. Okay.
Thank you. So one more question before we transition over to we'll do a little switcheroo here. But one question that just came in. Wonder how concepts like democracy and sovereignty are understood and contested in indigenous communities in the United States.
Say it again. How what?
How the concepts like democracy and sovereignty are understood and contested in the indigenous communities in the United States.
Yeah.
Well, we live where we live, it's a big problem. We live on, well, everyone who lives in the United States is living on indigenous people's lands. And we live in a place where we have Native Americans next door, and we're living on their land. And it's caused a lot of issues. They put up, what do they call? They
put up signposts and they're renting space on signposts.
Yeah,
to earn money because they're very poor.
And people are very angry about it because they say it's ugly. It's on the highway coming into the Hamptons, which is a place where people think that spend a lot of money to be here. And I forgot what the original question was because I just started thinking about our
indigenous people and their view of democracy and
I wonder how concepts of democracy and sovereignty are understood and contested in the indigenous communities in the U.S.
Well, I think it's understood by indigenous groups that they really should have a lot more power and say over at least the land that they've been given. And out here, where we live in Long Island, there's just a lot of conflict. The government, the state government, I think it is now suing the Shinnecock tribe because of these signs that they put up. And now they want to build a gas station on their land. And people are all upset that it'll mean that there'll be too much traffic in their neighborhood. I mean, these are the kinds of things, sovereignty is not something that is easily gotten by our indigenous people all over the country.
And the other thing you should know is that one of the things that the tribe has made a lot of money on is that they sell a lot of marijuana. They have marijuana shops that are public and legal all along the highway, right at the point where the tribes live. And that creates an image for people of saying, what is selling drugs? Well, these are legal.
But it's their land. They have a little piece of land left that most of it was taken away by the wealthy. And they do have some land left, which they're doing wonderful things on. And unfortunately, people are getting in the way of them surviving.
They don't even get mail delivery. If they want to get their mail, they have to go to the post office to get it.
It's like that across the country, I think.
Yeah. Because, they claim and they are a separate nation. That's how they argue the right to do what they do. They don't pay taxes on cigarettes. So they sell cigarettes, which, not something I would support, but they sell them at a very low price. There are no taxes on the cigarettes they sell. As a separate nation, they're not obliged to pay. So it's a complicated thing, not only here, but I think all over the country.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your insights. I know we're going to get more questions. We will save those questions to a little bit later when we have the Q&A, but I do want to make some space right now for some of our other speakers. I want to introduce or reintroduce, the audience has already met Dr. Ni Zhang, who's the Associate Director of the Center for Chinese Studies at UH. Before joining UH, she had been a devoted leader in China's Children's Museum field for over 10 years and is the founding director of the Children's Museum Research Center, affiliated with Beijing Normal University. She promoted children's museum education in China through research, publication, professional training, consulting, and international conferences. Collaborating with the local government and foundation, she successfully launched 2 children's museums in China. She holds a master's in education degree from Teachers College, Columbia University, and a doctor of education degree at Johns Hopkins University School of Education. And she's also co-author of this publication. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jose. I love how Nick and Tina opened the conversation. I know they keep telling me they don't want to lecture anything, so just raised a bunch of questions. So that's, I think, opened our today's discussion. And thank you, Jose, for bringing all those questions to make it more like a conversation. We don't want to lecture anything. So I think from my perspective, I'm going to talk about from my own research and experiences and sharing my perspective of social justice from the informal learning and parenting in China. I think that might be different from what you guys have already discussed, but it's more related to China and Chinese population. I think that will help you to see social justice issue in another country or another context. So I'm really happy that I can be part of this discussion and feel honored to be the co-author of this book. So in the book, Nick and Tina had shared 2 dimensions of social justice in regarding to informal learning. One is accessibility. Another one is power. I think accessibility is easy to understand, but for power, the idea is like who is deciding what children should learn and how they should learn it. It's more complicated. So as I tried to build children's museums in China to solve the accessibility issue, actually, I myself was constrained by my own limited perception about learning, like what is learning, like what children should learn, how they should learn it. So as I discussed in the book, as educators, we have to remind ourselves like the social cultural context we're working in and be aware of the meaning of social justice in different social contexts. So the least thing we want to do is like we actually create this social injustice, like in the name of social justice. That's really very complicated. So I have been learning this through my whole career and also through my research. This is really a mind-blowing process. So a little bit of background, I was born, raised in mainland China, and I had a master and a doctor of education from the US. And I work on education projects in China for decades. And my perspective is a little bit different from the presenters or the other speakers. So the important lessons I learned from my dissertation, I really want to share. So with everyone today, I won't share the whole dissertation, but I think the problems I found or the problem I be aware of myself probably be insightful or help you inspire in your own thinking. So this is the problem I found in children's museums. So I built like I found Chinese parents, they may not support their children's learning during play. They like to supervise, like to discipline, ignore, or instruct their children during their play. Might be the problem across different countries, but more prevalent in China. So before I started my research, I assumed Chinese parents don't know the learning value of play. So they don't know how to play with their children. That's my assumption. So I did a lot of like parenting workshop to help them, teach them how to play with their children. And it turned out that my efforts may actually have some unintended consequences, which I'll talk about later. So this is a graphic view of my NISA 7 study. It illustrates the possible relationship between Chinese parents' play behavior, their learning behavior, their play beliefs, learning beliefs. So it won't go into detail, but I wanted you to pay close attention to the negative feelings like anxiety, uncertainty, or incompetence. That whole complex like the environment provided to them. So I want you to imagine like the context of Chinese parents, like starting 40 years ago, China opened up to the world, like the economic rapid growth, and then different values pouring into China, and a lot of translated child rearing books like flooded Chinese markets. So experts from around the world keep telling Chinese parents how you should raise your children and correcting their way of parenting. So many young parents in China, they tried so hard to raise their children differently from their own upbringing because they're reading all the books and they're hearing all the experts' advice. So, but in that environment, grandparents, they won't accept new values so easily, right? There's a cross-cultural, cross-generational conflict. And also schools in China, they're still academic driven and they're teaching children in the traditional Chinese way. And this is in conflict with Chinese parenting. Like the young parents, they want to raise their children differently, but schools won't provide what they want. Then there are tension there. So parents will feel anxious, of course, they feel incompetent. Also, their own upbringing is so different from what experts suggested. So their parenting behavior is actually mostly from their own upbringing. So when they feel like they can't do what they should be doing, of course they feel incompetent and their values like constantly shifting. So they're uncertain about what they should do. So actually I was contributing to that kind of a dilemma previously. So that's also when I recognized this is the problem. Like as educators, we're trying to impose a correct way of doing things to parents, and they are so in a position like they feel they are incompetent or they're uncertain. They don't know what to do. So here, after I learned about this, I designed an intervention. This intervention, the primary focus is to focus on their own needs, like respect their own belief in what is the most important thing for their children in China, not like anywhere else, like in their own context, what's the most important thing. And so we need to provide them the tools or empower them instead of making them feel incompetent. So the most important part of this intervention is the co-construction of the beliefs through the dialogue with parents. Like today, we have dialogue, conversation. We're not like making like who is giving the correct definition of something. So I think instead of imposing what is the correct way of learning or correct way of supporting their children's learning, I try to include them in the conversation so they may come to their own understanding. So this is the model of the intervention, and I made it easier for them. So they only need to watch like 5 or 10 minutes videos for each session and complete some tasks. And also they can learn at whatever place or whenever convenient because they're so busy. And they also are encouraged to interact online with other parents so they can learn from each other. The process is really beautiful because it's a two-way learning. I learned a lot from them and I learned a lot from the dialogue with them. So the effectiveness of the intervention is amazing too, because their child rearing beliefs and play learning beliefs transformed through the whole process, even though I didn't tell them what is the correct way. And also their self-efficacy level and how they play with their children also changed. So, and I didn't design to change their family relationships, but they do change, like improved family relationships, like less conflict between generations, and also our children's behavior start to change. So that's really great to know. And also we still found some stress and guilt in some parents because they think they did not do enough, or they feel like I did something wrong previously. But that's something we want to minimize in the future. Like, do not let them feel guilty about what they have done to their children. It's a learning process. So in general, the intervention did not try to tell them what to do and try to correct them, but we're trying to help them to see what they had been doing and what might be some possible solutions, or what they might be able to do in the future. So it worked out so well. Coming back to our topic today, I think I can imagine like how many different parenting programs in China may have created those negative feelings among Chinese parents. And because like we're trying to help them, but we make them feel anxious or uncertain or incompetent. So bring this idea back to the larger context of what we have been discussing. So I think no matter how we want, like who we want to educate or where we're trying to educate people, I think it's critical for educators like for us to know like the power we have, and we really need to use that power very cautiously. So that's my learning from the whole process. I hope this could encourage more discussion like today. Hopeful to hear any questions, comments, or discussions later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was very wonderful just to get that insight into the work you've been doing. And it reminds me a little bit of one of the things that I tend to do in my own conversations around trying to get folks to just change their perspective about, are we trying to focus on who's right or what's actually right for the whole community as a whole. And so yeah, the difference between an argument and a discussion, basically. So when we focus on the what's right, we're having an actual conversation as opposed to an argument. So thank you so much for that. I do want to now shift a little to our other. Oh, yes, please.
I just want to say one thing,
Yes.
if I may. Oh, sorry. I just want to say one thing. Do you realize how lucky I am to have had Kanita and Ni and Dee as three of my students? How did that happen? They are so wonderful, and they've done such wonderful work. And I don't think you even mentioned adequately your work in setting up the children's museums across China and across the world. She's done that. That's her accomplishment. So to all three of them, thank you for being here. And thank you.
Thank you for being such a wonderful advisor.
Ah.
Yeah, we were the fortunate ones. I think we lucked out. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. I love this experience of gratitude and appreciation. I think it's clearly a sign of modeling, really good modeling. So thank you both for the work you've displayed over time, and just being available and open to have those conversations. I think that's really at the core of the work that we do. And hopefully with the mentoring you provided, they are now continuing on to model and mentor future generations of scholars as well. So thank you. Our next speaker with us today is Professor Su. Dr. Dee Su is a professor known as Didi in the Department of Educational Foundations, College of Education here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She received her doctorate degree from Harvard Graduate School of Education in 1992. She has 31 years of teaching experience in higher education, as well as served as a teacher in K-12 as well. Her research focuses on educational philosophy and its application global and international education and teacher education. Her recent publications focus on bridging Eastern and Western philosophy from educational practices, including the Dunhuang Grottos and global education. And she has a plethora of accolades and experience. And I'm I want to make space for her to share with us today. I just will share. She was honored in the Who's Who's Among American Teachers in 1996, 1998, 2000, 2001, and 2008. It sounds like there might be another Who's Who award coming in the near future. So, Professor Sue, if you're there, or Dee Dee.
Thank you, Jose, for a wonderful introduction. No pressure. Yeah. And I'm a learner here, and I'm delighted. And thank you, Ni, for the wonderful invitation. And so I can be in this space and have the opportunity to learn from all of you. And Nick and Tina, if I may use everyone's first name, it's Ohana, it's a family here. Yeah. And to me, in the scholarly family. And this probably is the CCS, speaker series with the strongest panelist. Yeah, not only in number, but in terms of diversity and quality. And the conversation we focused on with this book that all of you, write together and really focus on the most important issues, social justice and democracy. As Jose mentioned earlier, yeah, in one of his introductions and conversations, in education in general, whether it's from K to 12 or in higher education, most of the times nowadays the formal educational system, the huge ones, gigantic ones, and focus on the subject matter. Yeah, we focused on how to teach the subject. Maybe, focus on so they would find a job and make money and hopefully have a better life. Yeah, supposedly so. And very rarely we talk about what is the true purpose and real issues underlining education and what we teach. So this conversation that Nick and Tina, yeah, led us discussing about the social justice from the definition and democracy and all the important terms such as critical thinking and freedom and also citizenship is so timely, extremely timely, not only here in the United States, but also globally in this concept. And I believe that's really important first to examine. And also most of the times people have these misconceptions about social justice is always for minority. So a lot of people shy away from it. Even minorities shy away from it because as if we're fighting for ourselves to stepping on the others to climb the ladder and to get a better opportunities at the other people's expense. The key concept of social justice and democracy is important through today's discussion, through their book, is to show the complexity is not just about a minority or majority, because that would change, right? In different countries, I mean, even in the United States right now, the minority and the majority change drastically. And pretty soon, the minority would be the majority. And in Hawaii, where we are at the University of Manoa, nobody is majority. It's all minority, right? So the key is not who should be in charge, who should be better. It's actually for the entire humanity. So this social justice is for all. Meaning all is extremely important, yeah, for all of us to focus. And this book and this conversation, today's talk, yeah, dialogue, give us this opportunity for focus on what really matters in education at its foundation. Yeah, basically, it's also examining our higher consciousness. Yeah, and then our true human existence. Yeah, and that's I thank you for all of you, and also to Kunita, and then Dee, you are also Deanna, and also for Stacy to be here, with us in spirit. Yeah. And then through your book, actually, all of you use it as an example to show how actually you role modeling this democracy. Yeah. The second point I'd like to make is when we talk about social justice and then democracy, but also what is beyond that? What are we going to achieve? Probably not only human focused, and then truly focused on all beings, Mother Earth, planet, and then our universe, and even beyond. Yeah, the space is opening up to all of us, and it's challenging all of us with all the weather, the hurricanes in Florida is an example. Yes, they say is experiencing, and hope all of them would be safe. And then also I enjoy Ni's conversation talking about the complexity and looking at education, social justice in a larger context, going beyond just formal education. Yeah. And then to look at also, she used her research to show how to transform the mindset. Yeah, the belief, change the belief, and then lead to sustainable actions. I believe all of those are very important issues. And also right now in education in the whole world, access is important. But equal access, so to speak, is not really equal. And equal access does not guarantee equity and equality. I believe diversity and true honoring respect for all humanities and all beings will lead us to us. Yeah, so I'm now going to comment more because I'm excited, yeah, for this topic. I'd like to leave more room for further questions and continue democratic conversation and creation. Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Jose.
Thank you so much for that, and love the rainbow. Never gets old. Well, thank you everyone for being here, being present with us, also our audience. We're going to shift over now to our Q&A portion of it with our speakers, panelists. Questions can be for any of the folks you've heard from today. We do have already one question in our audience. Someone shared about, I may have missed the part where you explained, but could you explain again what was the intervention? I heard something like playing videos in this research.
Yeah, I think it's for me, right?
Yes, I believe that's for you. Yes, thank you.
Right. I talked about intervention. I didn't go in depth, but because it's a too long conversation. But basically, I designed 12 short cartoon videos, one each for 5 to 10 minutes. Like it's very fun to watch, so parents won't feel bored, like listen to someone lecturing them. So it's a very fun video for them to watch. So after watching the video, and they need to complete some learning tasks. Like, for example, they need to observe their children for 5 minutes and writing down their notes, or they can play with their children for 30 minutes and writing down their reflection. So small things like that. And then they can join the conversation, tell us how they feel. In that 5 or 10 minutes short videos, I did include some videos I showed in the children's museums. Like some parents play with their children. I shoot the videos, get their consent, and use that in our curriculum. So in that, they will see how parents play with their children, and they will see themselves in that video. So that's when they start reflecting. Oh, I was just like that mom. I was like instructing my child all the time, and see my child that she had a hard time, like really playing, enjoying. So that's when they start reflecting. So I think that's a very powerful way of learning. I don't want to say this is not right. I didn't say this is not right way. I just show them the video and they reflect on it and they discuss among themselves. That's basically how it is.
I feel like we should be adding that to museums around here as well. Just
I hope so.
I think about, how many times the folks go to museums, and especially this day and age with technology, the kids are playing and sometimes the parents are like multitasking by trying to check their work email on their phone or something like that. And there's
We all
lessons to
have
be
that
learned.
time.
There's missed opportunities for lessons to be learned. That's what I'm thinking right now. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see, any other questions from our audience? Please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And if not, I can get creative unless the audience here or the panelists themselves have questions for each other. But okay. Well,
I actually do have a
yeah,
question
please.
for our fellow panelists. The community schools. So in the States, my organization does work around community schools as well. But there needs to be, the financing is a huge impediment to them being successful and sustained. And a lot of times it takes a lot of philanthropic support from the local communities. How is that done? Is that an issue in Canada?
Yeah, so like as I mentioned, the way that we support or we kind of build our community school partnerships is a lot through philanthropic work. So we do rely on community partnerships to fund, and the funding streams are not always consistent. So we do struggle a little bit with that as well. We also have in our school district, which is the largest kind of in Western Canada, we do have like major endowments as well. So for people to support the work. But I think what we've found is, of course, as the funding streams dry up, of course, certain initiatives and projects and things that we get going start to fall apart. So we really try to, I think within our schools we're trying to move towards like more embedded models of support that way. And like, as you mentioned around that structure and systems work, I feel like that really has to happen a lot more for it to be more sustainable, because what's happening is, again, you rely so much on the outside agencies kind of supporting us. And then what happens is all that work kind of dries up as soon as they pull out or they can't work with us anymore, right? Because there's no funding. So I think I mean, as we kind of move towards like this more embedded model, I think it becomes even more and more important that we look at the systems work and really try to figure out a way that it can be sustainable, because we do struggle with that for sure here.
I also have a question for Dee. And from your expertise, you also mentioned the importance of mental health. Yeah. And after COVID right now, and where you are, how do you see that issue addressed in connection with the social justice or injustice?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Something that certainly we're really struggling with, as I'm sure all populations around the world post-COVID. What we're really struggling with, of course, is getting students back in, and even families, to connect back to school. It's been a challenge just because, again, when you've been away and things have actually gone pretty okay, it's really hard to kind of build that trust in the school system again. We're having a lot of families and students say, well, really, we were kind of happy being at home. And so we don't really, it's just been we've feel now that we really need to spend that time kind of building that engagement and trust again with our families. Certainly, I think with the mental health lens, it becomes even more important to do that community work, because what we know is just having schools be responsible for supporting students' mental health needs is just not enough. We really do need to focus on bringing in our community partnerships. And what we find is, like, of course, everybody's pretty siloed, right? Everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and we're not coordinating care properly. And so that's, again, one of the things that, we discuss in the book, is that importance of that, what we call wraparound or integrated support, where we are bringing in communities, but we have to do it in a way that, again, is sustainable and also accessible for our families. Because if there's just too many barriers, it gets to the point where families are they get overwhelmed. And then they don't access the supports that are even there. They don't even know how to, right? So it's really trying to build in also success for our families and our communities, so that, yeah, they're there, but we need to coordinate better. Because what we're finding is that even like putting up websites or connections, videos or supports, that's sometimes really hard for families to connect with, and they just find the whole idea overwhelming, and they really do need that kind of coordinated kind of care system to be able to kind of access and support. So I think one of the things that we've been focusing on anyways in our district is trying to build those integrated supports a bit better, and really looking at it from a systems perspective, so that we can build those success for our families.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we still have a couple more minutes. I just want to make sure if anyone has any last minute questions. I know we talked initially about having a shared vision of social justice. I wonder if folks, maybe we do a little quick round robin about just a few words that, what is social justice to you specifically? And when I prompt this, maybe I'll start. So to me, social justice is I think of social justice. So in the work that I do, it's about peace building, relationship building. So I look at social justice as an area of positive peace, and when we're engaging, building communities, building safe, brave spaces for all to be inclusive spaces. I know some folks will throw out words like DEI and other hot words about diversity, multiculturalism, but I think sometimes it just comes down to like practicing care and kindness toward each other, creating a better space than the one we entered into. In a lot of the work that I do, I try to just simplify it more into like building healthy, positive relationships. So that's really, to me, what social justice entails. But please feel free to say I'm completely wrong or jump in with your own perspectives. I'd love to just get some final closings before we get an actual closing.
Well, you can't be wrong because Dr. Nick and Dr. Tina told us that it's a tested concept. So of course we're going to have different definitions.
Yes.
But hopefully we're coming to some kind of common understanding. I spoke a little bit about it earlier. I think generally when we talk about social justice, we tend to think of it in terms of like distribution of wealth, opportunity, and privilege, and the thought that everyone deserves kind of equal economic, political, social rights and opportunities in the country. But when we are talking about it more specifically related to education, we define it and really kind of a noun or a result and a verb or action, and kind of it's an outcome with the noun, and that it really, again, is the state where student success and well-being is no longer predictable by any social, economic, cultural factor. Those social determinants of education that we've talked about, as action, it really is about being intentional about interrupting and dismantling any harmful or inequitable practices and policies that continue to perpetuate biases, and really work to create truly inclusive, culturally responsive school environments, and just really ensuring that every child gets what they need when they need it, when they enter buildings, and have the opportunity to learn based on who they are when they enter buildings.
Thank you.
Well, I do have a definition, but wait, I don't know. Sorry.
Now you're muted on both.
No, how's that? Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
This
yeah.
one's well better.
I'll tell you, we struggle with it, and the definition that I use largely comes from people who've written about democracy. And I think it has to do with saying you lead your life every day in every way about non-discrimination and non-repression. You think about how you deal with people and make certain that you're not discriminating and you're doing nothing to repress them. In fact, education should be empowering them, not repressing them. And so I think those two ideas, discrimination and repression, are absent if you have social justice. So that's what I sort of wound up saying is my vision of it.
I
Thank
can
you.
add on, it's really hard to practice, right? Sometimes we're not aware, like we're actually like trying to impose certain value. It's something we have to constantly remind ourselves, like what I did, like I have to reflect on what I did was wrong, or what I should differently. If I did it differently, it might be more inclusive. So
Yep.
I think that's really hard for everyone to put into practice. It has to be, yeah, constantly be aware of everything we're doing.
Has to do with respect for people as well, you know,
Yeah.
and caring about them and not repressing them.
Right.
It's so true in teaching, it's very much so. So I agree with everyone. It's actually living the beliefs we have, right? And then open up. We're honoring every soul we encounter and opening up that space, so it's safe, it's interactive, it's engaging, it's creative, so everyone can reach their potential to the fullest. By doing so, all of us rising together in such a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable way. No one is better than the other. Together, we are brilliant. Yeah. And the earth is rich enough to support everyone, and we don't need to exploit the others. and make others poor so someone can be billionaires and then create all the bombs and then bomb the others, poor people into oblivions. Yeah, so that is a mindset we need to change. And from all of your work and also your niece example also is the transformation of the mind, truly, not top down, saying you have to do it. Is we live it and then everyone choose to do it in such a beautiful way because we can all enjoy it. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Jose, any final words? So we need to
Well,
probably
no,
close this
just
session.
thank you so much to everyone for being here today, for coming together for this wonderful conversation. Greatly appreciate you all for being present. I think this is just the beginning. I hope actually whenever we do these things, I really hope that people bring it, bring the recording into your classroom and then have a discussion from this, because I think there's such more lively conversations to be had. And that's really at the core of building beloved communities, having those open dialogues, creating that space for the
I look
inclusivity.
forward to seeing what we said.
Thank you so much, Jose. This session is so hard to moderate, I know. But you
It's
did a
been a
great
pleasure.
job.
It's been a pleasure.
So
We have
I
been
think we're
looking
running out
forward
of
to
time.
this,
Yeah.
really, really
Yeah,
looking
so
forward. Thank you, Nate, for thinking of us. We've been looking forward to it, and we have one more, actually, a week from tomorrow. We're speaking at the Democratic Club of Suffolk County, which is all the candidates running for office. You might guess that I'm on the board of the Democratic Party out here. But the two guys who are speaking, I have some doubts about them, but they're going to read the book. The whole group is coming to this breakfast, and we're going to have a good conversation, I think. I hope.
that's great. That's great. So I think we're running out of time. So before we close today's session, I would like to announce our next CCS webinar that will take place on October 23rd. It's featured a roundtable on Taiwan's domestic and cross-strait landscape after President Lai's National Day address. So it will be moderated by Margaret Lewis, Associate Dean for Faculty Development and Institutional Operations and Professor of Law. And also we have other two panelists, including Lev Nachman, Political Science Professor at National Cheng Chi University in Taipei, Wei Ting Yin, Assistant Research Fellow at the Institute for Political Science at Academia Sinica. So you will probably find the register link in our chat box. To conclude our session today, I want to thank everyone to join us. Let's give us a round of applause for everyone's excellent work today. Yeah, and for very informative presentation discussion, it's profound dialogue. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone else enjoyed as well. So please stay tuned. Fill us our survey, and until our next CCS webinar on October 23rd, everyone have a great and wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Hello, nice meeting you all. Take care.
Mahalo.
Come to Hawaii to see us.
Everyone.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank